Daphne!
The members of the boys are all crumbling down under the pressure. MM is struggling with the leadership role he's been assigned. Frenchie's murderous past is haunting him into drugs and grief. Starlight is struggling with her powers because of emotional trauma and a severe identity crisis. Kimiko also has her past catching up to her. But the worst of all came down on Hughie, who's torn between his responsibility toward his dear old dad and the expectations his team has for him as a member of the boys. Now, to make matters worse, Hughie's estranged mother injected a brain-dead Hugh Campbell Senior with a dose of Compound V, which gave him the power to phase through objects, apart from messing with his brain big time. In the end, Hughie had to euthanize his dad, and it seems that this time around, Mr. Campbell is gone for good. But Simon Pegg, as the souped up Hugh Campbell, had some awesome abilities thanks to Compound V that totally changed his anatomy and psyche. So in this video, we'll explore his anatomy and see the extent of his powers and abilities, before exploring what this means for Hugh's future in the story. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. He can now control the atoms of his body. The primary ability that Hugh Campbell Senior got after his Compound V dose is the ability to manipulate his body's atoms and molecules to pass between the atoms and molecules of other objects. This allows him to easily pass or phase through the said objects, be it walls, doors, or even humans. Now, when Hugh passes through something, that object essentially remains unharmed, unless Hugh chooses to become solid again, in the sense that he stops passing his atoms through the spaces between the other object's atoms. That's why the man in the hospital bed exploded when Hugh phased through him but stopped midway. Does he become intangible? Well, from the looks of it, it seems like Hugh does become intangible. I mean, think about it. Even air cannot pass through a wall, but Hugh can, which can only mean that all the atoms in his body work as separate entities. His control over his atoms makes him, ghostly, for the lack of a better term. So you can say that for all intents and purposes, Hugh becomes intangible. Although he did not participate in a fight, I'm guessing he would be immune to all forms of attacks in this state, because his atoms would simply rearrange themselves when attacked, be it a punch, or something like Homelander's heat vision. But of course, he'll have to have control over his power. Unfortunately, episode 5 tells us that he's dead. He can phase partially. Hugh can make parts of his body intangible. For instance, if he wants to pull out your heart from your body, he can just phase his hand inside you, grab your heart by making his hand tangible, and pull it out like it's nobody's business. This is a huge advantage for someone who can control their powers. You could do so much with it and fight so many with it. I mean, imagine phasing into Homelander and just becoming tangible again. Problem solved in one clean sweep. But yeah, it wouldn't be that easy. I mean, given how strong Homelander is, I'm pretty sure losing the phasing form would actually crush you, much like doing so within a concrete block. His power extends to other things in his person. Unlike his son's Temp V powers, which made him teleport naked, Hugh can phase his clothes as well, so I'm assuming that he can phase other objects and people too. He will of course need years of practice to be able to do that, but it's definitely possible. But yeah, he'll definitely need to maintain physical contact with the objects or people he's trying to phase. The more time Hugh Senior would have had with his powers, the more they would have enhanced. Ability to cause severe damage. Now, we did see how Mr. Campbell could hurt humans, but imagine if he were to phase through an electrical system. The thing is, although he's phased, he's essentially a bunch of atoms. While these atoms pass through the electrical system, they lose electrons, which might just have an effect on the flow of electricity. Can he become normal inside harder, solid objects like concrete? As I mentioned earlier, it would be extremely difficult for him to quit his intangible form inside a solid object like a concrete block, or a wall wide and tall enough to absorb him. The pressure inside the wall would definitely crush him, leaving him smashed.
You're not Hughie.
He's developed amnesia. As a side effect of Compound V used on a dead brain, Hugh's brain has fried. He has developed amnesia and become exceedingly violent. When Hughie confronts him, Hugh thinks that Hughie was still 11 years old. In fact, even before he used his powers in the devastating manner that he did, he'd begun to show signs of forgetfulness. When Hughie's mom went to the ladies' room after an emotional conversation, Hugh forgot where she was. Violent streak and resurfacing of repressed emotions. We know Hugh as a calm and composed man, but the V has changed that for the worst. Now he was all violent. Someone who wants to murder his wife for abandoning him and their child. This is a fairly new side of Mr. Campbell, which has to be his repressed emotions coming to the fore. I believe Compound V has somehow removed all his inhibitions and the limitations put on a man by society or the penal system. That's the only logical explanation for this newfound murderous rage. Hugh develops superhuman hearing. One thing that's common with most supes is that they have superhuman hearing. In the comics, even Starlight has this ability, and it seems that Compound V helped Hugh with the same ability.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The three of us. Yeah. The three of us.
The effects of Compound V were not immediate. Of course, the harmful effects of Compound V did not take place immediately. But yeah, he developed a red hue in his eyes as soon as he was shot with the chemical. When he woke up from his brain-dead slumber, he seemed pretty normal, talking about random things like the typical Hugh Campbell we know, as Compound V started taking its effect. Which comic book character is Hugh a parody of? Well, Hugh is pretty much based on the Marvel mutant named Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat. She has the same powers as Hugh and can phase through objects and people. In What If? Astonishing X-Men, she phases her hand through Emma Frost's chest and pulls out her heart, killing her instantly. Furthermore, in What If? Wolverine, Enemy of the State, Kitty kills Wolverine by phasing her hands into his head and solidifying it before destroying his brain. In more recent storylines, namely the Hellfire Gala and subsequent events, Kitty Pryde adopted a darker persona known as Shadowcat. That's Shadowcat with a K. Anyway, after witnessing the massacre of her friends and fellow mutants, Kitty became ruthless in her quest for vengeance against the Orcus organization. She used her phasing powers in brutal ways, such as phasing enemies into solid objects, causing them to fuse with the material and die instantly. Did he really die? The show seems to suggest that a cocktail of drugs killed Mr. Campbell, but I somehow find it strange that a man with his abilities can just die so easily. As hard as it was to witness his death on screen, I feel like he might return in the next episode, unless of course they don't really have the budget to keep Simon Pegg around for more episodes. Having said that, this opens up a great many possibilities for Hughie and his character development. Where does Hughie go from here? Before Hugh gets into the thick of his dark new powers, he has a chat with his son about letting go, how Hughie holds on to things he loves. Hugh has always tried to protect his kid from the same kind of hurt, knowing all too well his son's tight grip on the people he loves. He even brings up the loss of his childhood pet to make his point, but it doesn't quite land. It feels off, and kinda tried to paint Hughie's struggle to move on as some sort of flaw. I mean, think about it. Is it even fair to expect a kid to make peace with saying goodbye to a beloved pet out of mercy? Or to suddenly be cool with a mom who abandoned him only to come back years later? Hughie, of course, has this emotional dependency brewing from old wounds, and calling him out for not being able to let go just doesn't sit right, considering the emotional growth he's been working through. However, close to the end of the episode, Hughie sees the torment his dad goes through due to the effects of V, and realizes that he has to end his suffering in a moment of mercy. But in his last moments, Hughie makes sure that his dad knows he's loved to the very end. Calling his dad his hero before making that heartbreaking decision really hammers home the brutal contrast to his earlier inability to do the same for his pet. It's a tough pill to swallow, watching Hugh take his last breath. Hughie's actions in The Boys Season 4, Episode 5 might tear us up, but they seem pretty crucial to his journey forward. The boys have always seen Hughie as the soft one. In fact, Kessler makes a similar remark in the same episode. However, Hughie is now stepping up, and he's ready to make those hard calls. As I said, it's no fluke that Butcher and Kessler are in the background debating who's got the guts to do what's necessary. Turns out, Hughie might just be that guy. With Hughie showing he can handle the big decisions, he just became the perfect candidate to take on Vought and Homelander. He could very well be leading the squad soon, even though MM's currently at the helm. So, do you concur with this, or do you think Hugh's apparent death was in vain? You know where to let me know. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!